afternoon, honor students. So, since you're honor students, I thought I would share with you my experience as an honor student. This is a fish story. There were a lot of things I couldn't do very well as a kid. Sports, couldn't play basketball, it was terrible. Tried music, couldn't play the piano. But school, I could do school. So when I got to college, by the time I got to the end of my sophomore year, that was the time that people were invited to join the honors program. So it was no surprise to me that I was invited to join the honors program. I was a straight A student. I only ever got one B. It was in modern dance. That was another thing I couldn't do. Never got modern dance. But, you know, junior year, it was a seminar. We read books, we wrote papers. I could do that. Senior year, it was time to do an honors thesis. I elected to work on the circadian rhythms of the weakly electric fish, Sternarchus albiphorans. I know you're all jealous. You all wanted to do that. So at the time, there wasn't a whole lot actually known about circadian rhythms, but I went to the library and read everything that was written in English, designed the experiment, got this fish. It was a beautiful fish. It was a couple inches long. It was velvety black. It had this little white patch on its forehead, which is how it got its name. I designed the experiment. I built the equipment. Things were moving along very well, I thought. There were a few things that I hadn't really figured out. I only had one fish. I hadn't really figured out how I was going to do the data reduction, because what I was doing was I was trying to understand how this fish that had very poor eyesight, that these fish were from very turbid, muddy waters in South America. And so they had developed a sensory system by which they generated electricity in an organ in their tails, and then they had pores of low resistance around their heads, and so they created an electric field around their bodies, and that was the way they detected prey and the way they navigated their environment. And so the real question here was, okay, did they have these 24-hour rhythms like animals that have eyes and use light as a time giver? So anyway, I'm working my way through this, and I'm collecting 24 hours worth of data day in and day out. And it's a long paper trail of little notches. I had not figured out how I was going to reduce this to anything that was going to be presentable, but that comes much later. So anyway, I'm working through this, and so I was going in every day, feed the fish, take care of the fish, collect this data that's coming off of these trails of paper. And I did this every day until one day I decided I was going to take a break, because I was a commuter student and I was taking the subway to the lab every day, 7 days a week, to do this experiment. So I decided I was going to take a break, and I didn't go one day. The next day I went back. The fish was floating belly up. Now, I was in New York City, so if I had been working on pigeons or squirrels, it wouldn't have been a problem. But an exotic fish from South America, you don't get that in your local pet store. So, actually, we're coming up close to the anniversary of the fish's death, because the fish actually died on Christmas Day. So this occurred during the holiday break. So then, come the start of the spring semester, I had to go and talk to my mentor and explain to him how this was the end of my honors thesis, because there were many things wrong with this experiment. In retrospect, it was was full of confounding variables. I mean, just the fact that I was trying to understand whether this animal had a circadian rhythm, and I was a student, I was going to class, and so I was going in every day to feed the fish at the same time. You know, the fish could have told time by my appearance, right? There are all kinds of problems with this experiment, but you know, number one problem was I had no backup. The fish was dead. So I could not finish my honors project. My advisor, when I finally faced him with the fact that I was never going to finish this project, the deadlines were such that it just wasn't going to work, he was very understanding. And he did not discourage me from going on to graduate school. So I was able to graduate. I did not graduate with honors in my major. I did graduate with university honors. I went on to graduate school. My pre-dissertation research project, which was a much better design, was a success. I completed it rather quickly, got it into a manuscript, and got it submitted and accepted for publication. I thought I was on a roll. Started my dissertation, thought I had a great idea. Terrible idea, terrible idea. But I had learned at that point that you really had to be able to, as others have said, fail quickly, pivot, be resilient, look for a better option. And so I actually did finish a dissertation, but over the course of having had a couple of fairly large experiments that I couldn't finish, I did, I think, develop certain resilience. One would not have predicted that finding a dead fish in a tank on Christmas Day was an auspicious beginning for a scientific career, but things worked out. But I mean, when I began my career as an assistant professor, my first 7 grants were funded right away. No revision, nothing. And then I got a grant turned down, and I was shocked. But like the experiments that had not gone well, I mean, I had to learn from what was wrong with the proposal. I had to look at it and be critical of what I had done, just as, you know, in retrospect, my experiment on that poor fish was a terrible experiment. My first idea for a dissertation was really not a very good idea, but you've got to be able to develop that kind of self-critical capacity to look at your work and decide whether or not it's worth pursuing, and whether or not you need to simply move on to something better. And so, you know, over the course of my scientific career, you know, there were clearly ups and downs in experiments. There were ups and downs in grant submissions. But I think, you know, over the long haul, you've got to be able to, as everybody has said, learn from your mistakes, be resilient, and forge ahead, and be willing to take some risks. Because if you're not taking risks, particularly in science, you're probably only doing things that are just incremental. And you know, when you look back, you want to have an impact, and you don't want to simply do things that are incremental. So part of taking a risk is accepting failure. And you know, we're all evidence that you can survive that. Thank you.